to have you with us, although obviously we would much rather be able to see you in person. But thanks for joining us this evening. This would all normally be done in the BSR, and it was about a year ago that we last did it, and it was actually one of the final things we did before we were told that everything was closing down. And it's quite a frightening thought that today is the 1 year anniversary of the first letter that I ever sent to parents about COVID-19, although at the time we referred to it as novel coronavirus. It's been an extraordinary year, but before I talk about sixth form options, I just want to say a couple of things about how the boys have coped. We've got a lot of the boys with us, and you've done brilliantly. And I know it's been a far from easy time for you boys. I know it's been tough for your families as well. Lockdown and remote learning bring huge challenges, but you've just kept going and you've been working and participating really well. And you should be really proud of how you've done so far. Hopefully this won't go on for too much longer, and I'll say a few words about that in a moment. But well done on what you've done so far. I think it's all the more impressive in that there are two really significant sources of anxiety in your lives at the moment that come from two significant sources of uncertainty. And the first of those, of course, is when you'll be able to come back, when schools are going to reopen. As you know, the Prime Minister said on Wednesday that schools won't be able to reopen immediately after the February half-term break, but he's hopeful that schools will at least be able to start reopening, possibly in a phased manner, from the 8th of March. Now, we won't know until the next government announcement, which is scheduled for the week of the 22nd of February, when exactly we'll be able to reopen. Hopefully it will be on the 8th of March, but of course we'll keep you posted on that. Meanwhile, you just, I'm afraid, need to keep working, and I'll come on to the exams in a moment, but you've done, as I say, brilliantly so far. You just need to keep at it. Dr. Filtness is going to talk in a moment, and he'll say something about the fifth form trials, which will go ahead, even though for the first time in history, you'll be doing your fifth form trials at home. The second big uncertainty, of course, is the exams. And I know for all of you, that must be a particular source of stress and actually deep frustration, because I know you've worked hard towards those exams. And at this stage, with only a few months to go until you would have sat them, not to know what's happening must be deeply annoying and deeply frustrating, and as I say, a source of anxiety for you all. As I think you know, if you read the stuff that's gone out, Ofqual, the body that regulates qualifications, has been running a consultation on the proposal for how they'll assign grades in the summer. That consultation ends tomorrow, and it'll be at some point after that, I'm pretty sure it'll be next month, that they'll tell us how the grades will be awarded. Linked to that, as you probably know, A-levels and GCSEs are cancelled, but IGCSEs and international A-levels and BTECs are, for the moment, still scheduled to go ahead. The bodies that run those exams are apparently waiting to hear the outcome of the Ofqual consultation, and then they'll decide whether or not those exams will run and whether or not they'll follow the same process for grade awarding as for the A-levels and the GCSEs. So it is all the most horrendous mess, and I can only apologise to all of you for the stress that this must be causing. But we'll let you know just as soon as we can about what's happening. But well done on coping with that and all the other irritations, annoyances, uncertainties and anxieties that the last several months have brought. Now, moving on, for the rest of the webinar, we're going to talk about sixth form options and choices for the sixth form. And these are really important. And they really do warrant you spending time thinking about them. I've been doing this job here and elsewhere for quite a while now, and I know that good choices, getting the subject choices right, sets you up almost invariably for a really good, successful sixth form. If you get the choices wrong, it means you never really have a chance. If you do the wrong subjects you're not sufficiently good at, or subjects you just don't enjoy, subjects you just don't look forward to the lessons and don't look forward to the work, it just makes the sixth form such a hard slog, and that's not what it should be. Sixth form should be, as then university, which is where most of you will go after sixth form, should be a time when you're shedding those subjects you're not that interested in, and you're concentrating on the things that genuinely do interest and excite you. So it is really worth spending the time thinking about those options. The two golden rules, guys, are do subjects you enjoy and do subjects that you're good at. Please don't think that certain subjects look better than others. It's often said, for example, that maths opens a lot of doors, and math does open doors if it's a really good grade you get at the end of it. I've known people earlier in my career choosing maths when they just shouldn't have done it, and they were ill-advised and they found it too hard and they got a really poor grade and it didn't open any doors at all. So maths is only one example of that. Do things you know that you're good at, that you know you've got a good chance of succeeding at, and where the work isn't going to be a chore, it's going to be something you enjoy. Another piece of advice I'd give you is don't set your sort of distant goal on or your eyes on a particular career and think, I want to do that, and then work back from that to decide what A-levels you should do. Because what you should be doing is saying, right, what am I good at? What subjects do I think I'll enjoy? And what then do they lead to? That is a much better way of making good choices. Please also do your research. Know what particular subjects entail. Know how big the step up from GCSE to A-level is. And in some subjects, it can be considerable. And there's also, if I look at history, my subject, if you study 20th century history for GCSE, studying the Tudors for A-level might be right for you, but it's quite different. And you need to know what's entailed in your A-level course before you opt for it. Also make sure that you know what demands a particular course will make of you. And again, maths is important here. If you're doing economics, if you're doing science, great A-levels if you do them well, but make sure your maths is good enough to be able to support them. And finally, in terms of research, make sure, if you are interested, as I hope some of you will be, in courses that you won't have studied before, that you know, again, what they entail. As far as A-levels are concerned, we've got economics, business, history of art, photography, and we've got 3 BTEC courses in sport, enterprise and entrepreneurship, and creative digital media. They're really, really good courses, but make sure you know what they involve before you opt for them. But it would be worth having a look at those, all of those new A-levels and BTECs that you won't be familiar with, just to make sure they're not something that you might want to do. Now, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Filtness, and then we're going to hand over to Mr. Marston, who's going to talk about higher education. Dr. Filtness is going to talk about the options process. Can I just say to boys and parents, there'll be time for some questions and answers at the end. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will endeavour to answer all the questions you've got. But for now, Dr. Filtness, would you like to talk about the options process?
Thank you, Headmaster. In a minute, I'm going to share my screen with you. But before I do, I'd just like to say good evening to parents and good evening to boys. I'm going to be talking to the boys this evening, but I don't want that to underemphasize how important parents are in this whole process. And I'm really grateful to parents for everything that they are doing here. I'd also like to plug the parent survey, and thank you very much to parents who've already completed it. An email went out yesterday with the link. I'd also like to remind boys about their trial exams. Boys, you'll have had some email contact from me today, in fact, about that. The trial exams are going to be taking place. They're happening by remote after half term. And I will be writing to parents about that shortly. So for the moment, I'm going to share my screen and I will start my presentation. Hopefully you can see that. Right, some housekeeping things first of all. The options process and things to be aware of. First of all, boys, and I hope you know this already, the deadline for making choices is Monday, the 22nd of February. That's deliberately after half term, and it's designed to give you a chance to continue your discussions with your parents throughout half term. So you've got about a month before you have to make your decisions. You can change your mind after the 22nd of February, but please be aware that we start work on the timetable after that point, and some combinations of subjects will cease to be available. You make your choices on the pupil portal. It's open now, and you can log in and change them, tweak them, update them at any point you want up until the 22nd of February when the portal closes. I know that some boys have already put in some choices. That's absolutely fine. You can change them up until the 22nd. Boys, you have 3 choices. If you take further maths, that counts as a 4th, but I'm afraid it's not possible to take 4 subjects. You're welcome to come and have a conversation with me about off-timetable options, but I'm afraid for the purposes of choosing subjects, it's 3 goes. One of the reasons that we're asking you to think so carefully now is that you'll be studying those subjects for 2 years, and you also can't drop one. So you need to get your choices right. Now, I don't want to put pressure on you, but it is important that you understand essentially what you're letting yourself in for, really. We do let you switch subjects early on, but be aware that after half term in the Michaelmas term, you'll have missed so much work if you choose to change that it just isn't feasible. So again, the message now is to get your choices right. So given all of that, what things should you be thinking about now? What will help you pick sensible options? Well, as the headmaster said, the most important point is to pick subjects that you enjoy. You're going to be studying each of those subjects for 8 lessons and about 12 hours of hall and consolidation time each week. And trust me, enjoying what you're learning is really important if that's going to be successful. You also need to be good at the subjects that you pick. Now, use your target grades here to help you. You'll be aware that you need a 7 at GCSE to progress automatically onto an A-level subject. So boys, if you're targeted a 4 or a 5, that isn't going to work as a subject choice for you at A-level. I'll just mention now that BTECs have no prerequisites, but I'll come back to that later on. Another piece of advice we've given to the boys is to find out what you need for specific university courses. Engineering usually needs maths, so does economics, and science degrees, for example, frequently require 2 supporting science A-levels. However, I'd also echo what the headmaster said, that actually that's a little bit of a rabbit hole if you disappear too far down it. So be mindful what universities want, but in most cases, they don't state specific requirements. Another thing to avoid is to not to pick subjects because they balance each other out. Sometimes I have conversations with boys and they'll tell me that the reason they've picked a science as their 3rd subject is because it's not a humanity and they've got 2 humanities as their other subjects. That is flawed logic. You are specialising at the moment. So my advice is to pick subjects that go together. This is particularly important given that universities will be looking for specialist applications, and having a range of subjects that lead towards the subject you're going to do at university is helpful. Another thing that's helpful is to think about assessment. How much coursework is there? When are the exams? How many exams are there? Do you have to write essays? Is there an element of data analysis? Do you have to do case studies? Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's not. What skills do you need? These are all good questions to ask. Another good question to ask is what makes people successful in this subject? It's going to be slightly different for each of the A-level and BTEC courses. So make sure you've asked. Most of the options videos actually address this. I asked the heads of department to talk about this in them because it's so important. And I'll come back to the options videos later on, but it is a really, really helpful point when considering what you could do. 2 other pieces of advice. are not to make inferences between subjects and careers. And that's so important that, again, the headmaster talked about that too. Please don't assume, for example, that business A-level will definitely make you a successful entrepreneur. That actually can come from any combination of A-level or BTEC subjects. You don't need to do business at A-level to do business as your chosen profession. My last piece of advice is to take time, find out what the courses are like, and talk to people. Another source of information, and one I really hope that you've already been digging into, is the options booklet. So speak to people, read the booklet, watch the videos, go to university websites, but in essence, you need to do something and you need to do it now. And this is important, boys. So that's how to make your choices. What happens next? Well, I would strongly encourage you to watch the options videos on our stream channel. I will send out these slides, boys, to you, so you'll be able to click on the link. But it does look like this. And I'm really relieved to see that some of the videos have had close to 50 hits already, which is fantastic. So well done for looking at them. Your teachers, and in many cases, boys in the sixth form, have slaved over these videos. I think they're brilliant. They're a great introduction to the BTEC and A-level subjects, and I really strongly recommend that you spend an hour or so watching them. Each one's about 5 minutes, and some of them are very funny. If you've seen Dr. Manning's impression of David Attenborough, for example, I think that's rather good. As well as watching those videos, talk to people. You'll shortly have an interview with your tutor about this, boys, but I also recommend that you talk to your housemaster, heads of department, the careers team, sixth formers, your teachers, and of course your parents as well. Think about your taster sessions. I emailed the boys today about them. In fact, you need to choose 4 sessions, 4 taster sessions using the Microsoft survey form, which again, a link's come out to you today on that. You need to make those choices over the weekend. My advice to you is not to pick the things that you're definitely going to do. If you're definitely going to do them, there's no point in having a taster session. So instead, pick 4 things that you're not sure about. And that way you'll have the best opportunity to sample those courses before you make a decision. Also think about new subjects, the BTECs, economics, photography, philosophy and ethics, the EPQ, although you don't have to choose that now, but Miss Allen is making a video for the EPQ, which I hope is something that you'll find useful. There are 8 new subjects available that you haven't studied before, so have a look at them, if only to discount them. Make sure that you know what the subjects you're choosing are actually like and not what you'd like them to be. Philosophy and ethics, for example, is a very different course to religious studies GCSE. Please make sure you know what the differences are before you select it. Look at university admissions pages. Talk to the careers team. There are lots and lots of sources of help available to you at Sherborne, even though you're not here at the moment. But the most important thing is to keep talking, keep thinking, and ask for help. Don't leave it to the last minute, boys. Please don't. But I mentioned BTECs earlier on, and because they're new, I thought I'd give you an overview of them here. 2020 saw our first crop of results through the BTECs, and they were absolutely outstanding. 1/3 of the boys who took the BTECs achieved a starred distinction. Now that's the same as an A star at A-level. And another 2/5 achieved a distinction, which is the same as an A. And the lowest mark in the entire cohort was a merit, which is still a grade C. Now, if you add it up in those terms, actually the BTEC results came in higher than the A-level results in most subjects, which is maybe food for thought. 3 BTECs are available to you. Here they are. The universities that recognise them, which is many, equate them to A-levels, both in time and the grades produced. Most boys take 1 BTEC and 2 A-levels, although a small number of boys sometimes opt for 2 BTECs and 1 A-level in some years. The point to stress here is that BTECs are not better nor worse than A-levels. They're just different. A little bit like the pre-U and the IB are different options to A-level. They're not better, they're not worse, they're just different. BTECs focus on the development of skills with an emphasis on situated learning. They're assessed differently too, with a mixture of coursework, presentations, written assignment and exams. Creative digital media, in fact, is 100% coursework based, but the other two are 50% examined. And you can sit the exams in the summer or in January. And as I've said already, you can retake them. The SMART plan, though, is to bank good grades in those exams early on, which means you finish the qualification by the summer of your upper sixth. Literally finished. You know what grade you're going to be getting, done. And that leaves you to focus on the remaining A-level exams that you have at that time. So in other words, you've spread your work out. It's a really, actually quite clever way of doing things if you're someone who doesn't like exams all at the end. In terms of universities, most accept a mixture of BTEC and A-level, but I'll let Mr. Marsden talk about that in his presentation. Now, on that flawless segue, I will leave it there. And I'll just remind you that if you do have any questions, please use the question and answer function on Zoom and we'll address them at the end. But for the moment, I'll say thank you very much for listening, boys and parents, and I will hand you over to Mr. Marsden.
Thank you very much, Dr. Filtness. And thank you to all the boys and parents who are attending the webinar this evening. I'd also like to say really quick, well done for all of your efforts in yesterday's careers event. I got really good feedback on your general levels of engagement, and I also heard that you were sparky and suitably forward-looking in the one-to-one meetings that you had afterwards, some of which went into the evening. So well done for that. I'm just going to share screen with you now. So hopefully you are now looking at my slides. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how your sixth form options can affect your higher education options. Probably the most important point to make first is that you do not have to have a clear idea what you want to do at university in order to make good sixth form choices. I just want to give you a little bit of information here so that you can look ahead with confidence, because questions about this stuff often come up. So this is a very basic timeline showing where you are now, right through to beginning your next step after leaving Sherborne. I'm going to discuss this in the context of university applications mostly, because they'll probably apply to the majority, but I'll touch on some of the other post-school options at the end too. Right now, you're starting the process of selecting your sixth form options, and what I want to cover with you is how they might affect what you do next. In the lower sixth, you'll start researching university courses in more detail, and you'll even start the early stages of applying for them. And then in upper sixth, you'll need to fine tune, submit that application, and in Lent term of upper sixth, you'll start getting offers coming through, and you'll need to make your decision on a first choice and a backup if you're pursuing the UCAS route for UK universities. We will be doing a lot of work with you throughout sixth form to support your planning and your applications, but I'm just going to focus tonight on what might influence some of your sixth form options perhaps. So we'll have a look at how your choices now might affect some of those decisions going forward. This is a cut from a website called Russell Group Informed Choices. Russell Group of Universities, it's a group of 24 UK universities that are quite research intensive, and generally they're simplistically labelled as the good universities, but I'd be really quick to add that there are a lot of excellent universities that are not Russell Group members, so the rule is not quite as absolute as it might be made out to be sometimes. Their Informed Choices website allows you to find out a bit more about what A-level subjects might be necessary to study certain degrees. So when you're on this front page, if you select, I know what degree I want to study, it takes you through to choose a subject, and we'll have a look at it in a minute. It's worth noting that even on this front page, it specifies that you would need to check individual universities' websites to be sure, because the rules aren't always identical across different universities. So if you go through to the degree subjects, there's a long list to choose from. And again, I reiterate, I know that not many of you will know which degree you want to study, and we wouldn't expect you to, and it's absolutely fine. But if you have some really early speculative ideas, you could look through them here just to get a feel for examples where certain A levels might be necessary or at least strongly recommended in order to apply. Otherwise, just experiment with this to give you an idea of how it works and what entry requirements can sometimes look like. I'm going to focus on biology just to give us one example to look at. So when you click through, the advice it gives us is that biology A level is usually essential. I mean, I can't really imagine a case where it's not absolutely essential. And I might be slightly concerned about the universities that don't want to see A level biology, but this is what it tells us. It also says that a second science is required from one of the lists that's shown. But thinking back to the advice on the main page, it's worth then having a look at some individual universities' websites to see if that is always true. So I'm going to highlight 3 examples for you. First one, at Manchester, to study a straight degree in biology. It's true, you need to have studied 2 of these subjects. It doesn't say biology plus one of the others, but I take that as implied. At Edinburgh, they're very clear that both biology and chemistry are essential, which probably reflects the fact that their biology degree will involve post-A levels chemistry as part of it. So you can't be a chemistry novice, if you like, going into it. Cardiff says that you only need to have biology at A level and nothing else is specified. So with just that one subject example of biology and picking out 3 university examples, we've already got 3 slightly different outcomes. And it takes us back to the advice to really know you need to check individual university websites. Now that will be a process you go through in due course, but you can see some common threads there in terms of what might be necessary. I get that you're not in a position to look at it quite this precisely, or most of you won't be. So what I really want you to take away from that is to do a check if you think there's a chance you might study certain subjects, because at least that way you know what A levels are likely to be necessary to keep that door open to you. Then perhaps check a sample of 2 or 3 universities just to prove to yourself that that is true. Probably most importantly though, and echoing something the headmaster said before, the approach to choose the subjects that you feel you will be confident in, you're confident you'll enjoy them and confident that you'll do well in them, is really the healthiest start point rather than reverse engineering unless you have a very precise idea about what you want to do. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is BTECs. Again, it's a question that comes up and sometimes there are some myths around this. So I'd like to talk you through their impact on university applications. In essence, this slide sums it up. First question, do they count? They absolutely do. They can sit in combination with A levels and you can apply to universities with BTECs as well as A levels. Do they stop you applying for most courses? I get that question a lot. The answer is no. They may make you ineligible for some, and we'll look in a bit more detail. Do universities look down on them? The answer is absolutely not. Otherwise, they wouldn't be accepting them alongside A levels in the vast majority of cases. So starting with a very short list, those that don't, and you see 3 names there. And even with those, this rule is not absolute in their refusal to accept applications from BTEC students, but as a general rule, they don't. It's worth noting that these universities require A-level grades, 3 A's or higher for nearly all of their courses. So that's the kind of university we're looking at there. A much healthier list is the list of those that do accept BTECs, and almost all of those are what we would call Russell Group universities. They're all excellent universities, all offering a wide range of degree courses, and they do accept BTECs. But a bit like with the informed choices point about A levels that are necessary for certain degrees, it is important to note that even though that list of universities accepting BTECs is long, the devil is still in the detail, and you need to look at specific courses because even the universities may have some exceptions. So for lots of them, it'll be true to say that they accept BTECs for many courses, but not necessarily every course. I'm going to show you a few examples just to demonstrate the different ways that BTECs can be considered and the way that universities will express them in terms of their entry requirements. You often have to go to the small print somewhere to get this level of detail, and it's not something you necessarily want to do now. But after we've gone through these examples, hopefully it will give you a bit of a rule of thumb, and hopefully you can breathe a sigh of relief about selecting BTECs and the fact that that leaves these doors well and truly open to you. So the first example, Exeter's a really good example of a top university that sees A-levels and BTECs as quite interchangeable on a lot of its courses. I'm showing business and management here, and the entry requirements are still very competitive because they'll accept, well, they asked for 3 A's at A-level, but they would also accept 3 distinctions. D there is not the same as a D at A-level, it's distinction equivalent to an A in BTECs. And any combination therein. One of our 2020 leavers achieved an A and 2-star distinctions, and he flew onto a course at Exeter that was very competitive to get onto. The next example is another example where they're quite interchangeable. So studying history at Oxford Brookes, it's presented slightly differently. Fundamentally, they want 104 UCAS points. Different grades in A-levels and BTECs equate to a certain number of UCAS points, and it would be nauseating to show you that table right now. But here, 104 points that they need for this course. You could earn that with BBC at A-level, or with a distinction and 2 merits in BTECs, or any combination of those. Okay, so this third example is slightly different. So to study management at Manchester, you could get in with AAB at A-level. That's what they ask for. They're happy to take 2 A-levels and a BTEC, but they want that BTEC result to be at distinction star, which is actually equivalent to an A star. So in a sense, they've slightly raised the bar here if you have that combination. And this is the last example I'll show you. It's for accounting and finance at Bath. The bar's not raised. Bath is an excellent university. They'll accept 3 A's at A-level or 2 A's at A-level plus a distinction, which is the equivalent of an A in the BTEC. So that's like a 2+1 combination, all with equivalent of grade A. Something that's worth adding, which I haven't shown here, is that some courses may stipulate that a BTEC will be accepted if it's somehow relevant to the degree. So for example, if you studied BTEC Enterprise Entrepreneurship, you were going on to study business and management, that will be a banker, and they would say it's very much relevant. So as with almost everything I've shown you, the precise entry requirements vary, and there isn't a simple blanket rule. So to take away a rule of thumb as concisely as I feel I can give it without being misleading, there was a lot of detail there and some examples you saw, but it's best to assume that some courses may be unavailable to you, but many remain open to you, and you'll always need to check the individual university web pages for specific courses. But a point really worth noting is that those universities that just don't accept them, they do have really high entry requirements anyway of 3 A's or higher. This is just to let you know, I'll be distributing this to you and your tutors. It will be a quick reference guide covering both of the aspects that I've covered this evening. So you'll have that as another reference point when you're discussing your options with your parents and your tutor. I said I'll focus mostly on the university applications this evening, which I have. If you do apply for apprenticeships, which are on-the-job training schemes, we would of course support that. And for these hybrid schemes called degree apprenticeships, where you, with a mix of on-the-job training and university study, after which you get a degree, there are also specified entry requirements sometimes. This is a good example, the Rolls-Royce engineering degree apprenticeship, which is hugely competitive, and they require A-levels in maths and 1 science. So it's not just specific to universities, that there may be what we call facilitating subjects. If you're interested in studying overseas after Sherborne, well, that varies hugely by country and by course. But I would encourage you to attend the Overseas Higher Education webinar on the 17th of March. And I know that there are quite a few of the current 5th form who have already started that process, supported by Miss Clements. So that's all from me. I'll now hand you back to the headmaster so that hopefully we can respond to some of your questions.
Rob, thank you very much. Is my screen on? It is, excellent. I can't see myself, which is a good thing. Thank you both very much for that. We've got a couple of questions. So boys, parents, please do feel free to ping any further questions through the Q&A. We have another 15-20 minutes for questions. Rob, just picking up on the theme of BTECs, there's a question about our experience and whether, despite what universities say, we've had any evidence that they discriminate against BTEC candidates. It's quite difficult for us to say because, of course, last year was our first BTEC cohort coming through, and so it's a very small sample size. But I have no evidence that a well-qualified candidate with a BTEC is discriminated against by the universities who take them, which is most universities.
No, I would echo that. And as the headmaster said, we have a limited experience of it from Sherborne. But we did last year have some very successful students who had studied BTECs who got the places they wanted at the universities. We didn't see decline, we didn't see rejections on their applications to specific courses based on the fact that they had BTECs. We didn't see many rejections, full stop, actually. So anecdotally, based on last year, the answer is no. This year I had an interesting experience. There's one of the upper sixth who, again, because the devil is in the detail, and sometimes even then, you really just have to pick up the phone. So no one was answering. We got on a live chat room and eventually spoke to an admissions advisor in Newcastle, and we really had to dig into this. It was a competitive course. He's doing one BTEC, and we drilled down into it, and they said, that's absolutely relevant to the course you're applying for. So even though you can't feel a cast iron certainty when you're making the application, we will look favourably on the combination you're doing. So we have positive feedback on that. Again, it's anecdotal, but we've seen no evidence of discrimination against.
And I suppose the other thing, and this is not the only role of BTECs, but there's always been the issue for the boy who knows the 2 A levels they really want to do, and then slightly struggles for the third. And if you're not careful, you end up picking a third A level that you're not particularly interested in, that you don't do particularly well in, which brings your grades down. Now, a BTEC that you're interested in can be a real solution to that difficult third A level choice. Thank you, Rob. Tim, a question on whether places on A level courses are limited, and the answer is sort of yes and no.
Indeed. So that I'll leave it there. It is yes and no. The best way of answering that is to say that up until the 22nd of February, it's almost exclusively no, so that they are not limited. One of the reasons we do it this way round, by asking you to choose, is that we build the timetable, boys, around what you want. Some schools don't work that way. So Harrow, for example, have columns, and you've got to pick one subject in each column. And if the columns don't give you the combination you want, then that's just bad luck. We don't do that. So we start from a blank piece of paper each time, including the number of sets. After the 22nd, it becomes a bit more of a yes, because after the 22nd, the timetable begins to get locked in, and we appoint new teachers, for example, that we might need to. So if you change your mind after the 22nd, then we do sometimes have the situation, say in DT, for example, where the classes do just get full. And in that situation, I'd have to go back to you and say, I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to pick something else.
And again, Tim, with sciences, with practical subjects, there are constraints upon how many we can fit into a set. Arts, humanities, it's a little easier up to a point, but even then, there are only a certain number of desks and chairs in a room, and you do
particularly at the moment,
it's just full.
Yeah, I mean, we do have maximum class sizes. I'm sure, boys, you wouldn't want to be in a class with 150 other boys. So yeah, all this is very much. I mean, it's unusual. Almost always, we can give you what you want, and particularly if you get your choices in before the deadline.
Thanks, Tim. Can I stay with you? Psychology and tasters of psychology. I know we're looking at psychology. We want to be able to offer it. How would a taster work for a boy interested?
There isn't a psychology taster, I'm afraid. However, what I would say is come and talk to me. In fact, I emailed the boys who'd expressed an interest in doing options at Sherborne Girls to come and talk to me. I've actually taught psychology myself before, so I'm familiar with it. But if you come and talk to me, I'll put you in contact with the right person at Sherborne Girls, and I'll also explain to you how the choices process works. In a nutshell, boys, if you are interested in the Sherborne Girls option, I'd still like you to choose 3 subjects here, and then I'll explain to you how that's going to work with the options at Sherborne Girls, because obviously I don't do the Sherborne Girls timetable.
Sticking with A levels, Tim, Dr. Filtness, the question, can you do 4 A-levels other than doing further maths as one of them? I think the first question you have to ask is why you want to do 4. And I suspect we have experience of many doing or trying to do too many, thinking it's quantity that counts. And I've certainly known in the past boys who've done 4 at a previous school, got less good grades in each of them than had they done 3, and thus missed out on the top universities they otherwise could have gone to. It's partly a timetabling thing, isn't it? I mean, there are only a certain number of periods.
Yeah, we had a question from someone who asked, could they see a timetable for someone in the sixth form? I haven't prepared one, and for GDPR reasons, I'm not allowed to show you one unless it's been redacted. So, but I can describe one to you. The boys have 8 lessons in each subject. So, you know, that's 24 lessons. There are only 36 in the timetable, full stop. And that doesn't include the enrichment subjects that they do. So there literally aren't enough lessons to run a 4th block for timetable options. So boys, it's just 3 that you can pick. However, I'm willing to have a conversation with you about why you'd want to do a 4th and if a 4th is possible. We do in enrichment offer a number of AS levels and often, and the EPQ, and often the kind of benefits of doing a 4th A level are more than mopped up by doing one of those examined enrichment options. So a solid EPQ, for example, if you apply to Bath and get an A in your EPQ, they often lower your offer by 1 grade if you get an A in your EPQ, which they wouldn't do if you had a 4th A level. So if you're just after an extra qualification, I'd be nudging you more towards those. I have actually had a conversation with someone in the 5th form already, I won't give his name, about doing an option off timetable, and I think that might work. In a nutshell though, come and talk to me.
And again, Tim, there can, in certain cases, as you say, be benefits to doing 4. But first of all, universities find it very difficult to discriminate in favour of those who've got lots of A levels, simply because most schools and colleges aren't able to offer that, so they'd be discriminating against those. But also, it's not simply the number of formal qualifications you've got, it's what you're able to say in your personal statement, what you're able to talk about at the most competitive universities when you go for interview. And that's about books you've read, things you've done, interests you've got. And of course, if you crowd your time out too much with simple A-level work, you haven't got the time to do that, or capacity. And indeed, you haven't got the time, if you're not careful, to enjoy your 6th form life.
Absolutely. I mean, it can also backfire. So if you do 4 subjects, they can ask you to get a grade in the 4th one. This is a true story. I went to, many years ago, went to school with a guy who did 6 A-levels. He did 3 of them early. Those were his best 3, maths, further maths and chemistry. And he did 3 more. And Oxford said to him, oh, brilliant, your offer's 3 A's. And he said, well, I've already got 3 A-levels, thanks. And Oxford said, no. Your next 3 subjects, please. We'd like you to get the 3 A's in those. So he had to get 3 A's in his 4th, 5th and 6th least good A-levels. So it can backfire, although I'm not sure his story was particularly common.
A couple of questions that we got a fair few questions coming out. A couple I think we can knock off quite quickly. If you're choosing A-level business, would it be too much also to choose a BTEC in enterprise and entrepreneurship? No, absolutely. We've had at least one boy do that and do it successfully. You've got to be sufficiently interested, but they are different courses. They have different course content and there's different assessments. So no, that's not a problem. EPQ, do they timetable period each week? No, that's not how they run. I don't know, Tim or Rob, do you want to say something about just how the EPQ runs?
I'll say something very, very quickly. We're actually looking, boys, at the whole enrichment for next year. So please don't assume that what's happening at the moment will be the same for you. It may well change. We'd like to give more support for EPQ students. So a bit more timetable time. The idea being that you'd finish your EPQ in your lower 6th. The boys in the year above you pretty much did an EPQ in 1 term, which showed, and did really well, which showed that if you're really committed and really prepared to work at it, you can get a great result in a short space of time. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Rob, you're looking very sad and lonely there. So a question for you. Do we have any preferred or affiliate universities, universities we've got a particular link with?
We don't have any formal links with particular universities. There are some universities that tend to be quite popular for the boys here, Exeter, Durham, Oxford, but actually we have a really good spread. The ones who support us, and I suppose that's partly due to geographical proximity, Exeter have supported us with presenting at webinars, and they tend not to be too much of a sales pitch for just Exeter. Actually, it's just really sage advice from an admissions department at a good university that they will support us with. And also the director of admissions at Bath University, Mike Nicholson, has helped us over several years by presenting, and I hope he will to the parents on this call in due course, and to the boys as well, because he's fantastic, tells it like it is. I would hasten to add that none of this curries any favour for our applicants, because they have far more integrity in their admission systems than that. But we definitely get support from some really good universities on a regular basis.
But I certainly feel, Rob, and I suspect therefore so do you, we don't want to have too narrow a group of universities to which we're funneling the boys. The whole point is that there are lots of really good universities out there, all of them different, offering a vast range of courses. I don't want the boys to feel that there's only about a dozen universities that it's worth applying to, or that there's only a dozen sort of fashionable universities. They should be looking across the piece and seeing, even in universities that nobody from here might have gone to for the last 5 or 10 years, there might be the course for them.
And some of the most exciting things that could happen would be if someone wanted to apply for that Rolls-Royce degree apprenticeship and got onto that. I would be chuffed to bits if somebody was keen to apply for something like that. A bit different, but still really prestigious and unbelievably advantageous in terms of getting relevant experience and not accruing student debt and getting paid and all that kind of stuff. We also have people that have gone off to some really great courses in art foundation courses on their way to creative degrees, and even someone who's gone to, well, it's currently on ice, but gone to a fashion college in Paris. There are many different ways to carve a path to a future, and that select group of UK universities called Rosler Group is certainly not where we target anything for any reason, no.
Thanks, Rob. That's really helpful. Tim, you're a scientist. Is it essential to do maths with physics?
Some universities will ask for it. Again, I'd echo Mr. Marsden's words about the importance of checking with university websites. We do have some boys who will pick physics as a singleton science, so 2 humanities and physics. That would mean that you would cutting off the option of doing a science degree at most universities. My question, I suppose, would be why would you want to do that? Physics is hard, and if you haven't got maths, you're going to struggle. However, if you're prepared to catch up and you've got a solid 7 or better at maths GCSE, you could cope. Most boys, though, who do physics also do maths, so you don't have to, but it's quite a good idea.
So I suppose, Tim, if you're doing physics without maths because you find maths hard and don't want to do maths A-level, you shouldn't be doing physics A-level. You may well just be a very, very good mathematician, and for some unfathomable reason not want to do maths A-level, and then perhaps physics might be a runner. But there would, I think, have to be a sort of particular reason why you decided not to do maths if you were opting for physics.
Indeed. We every year we get a small number of boys, 1 or 2, in both maths and physics, unfortunately, who get D's and E's. And the reason is because they're not very good at maths. And, I'm saying this candidly, boys, because I would want to protect you from being that person. If you're not nailing the 7s and better in maths GCSE, I'll give you the 8s and 9s. Don't do maths and physics.
Thank you, Tim. There's another question which is sort of linked. It's about whether the idea of grouping subjects or doing something that a couple of sciences and a humanity, or a couple of humanities and a science, or whatever. It can work, and it can work really well if you're really good. There are certain people who have just a really powerful and broad intelligence and can cope very, very easily with separate disciplines. And that's brilliant. And if that is you, And by doing that, you're not precluding doing a particular combination of things that might lead to a degree course that you're interested in. That's great. But that tends to be, Tim, a fairly minority interest.
Yep, absolutely. Most people, by the time they're doing A-levels, most people are beginning to have an area of the curriculum where they're most comfortable, where they're doing the best, they're enjoying things the most, and that tends to be what they go on and do at university. Now, obviously there are people who break that rule, and fair play to them, they're more intelligent than I am. But mostly people who are doing a smattering of things are doing things because perhaps they haven't really thought through, or they're doing things that maybe they haven't tried before, or they're doing things to try and avoid things that they found difficult. My advice is to do subjects that support each other, not the least because if you like writing essays, you'll want to pick 2 subjects, maybe 3, where essays are the thing that you're doing. If you're doing a science and a humanity and maths, that's 3 very different styles of assessment that you've got to learn to master in a short space of time. So there are no hard and fast rules, but generally try and do things that support each other.
As you say, Dr. Filtness, no hard and fast rules. There are general things that generally apply, but there are exceptions. But you need to have the right conversations with tutor, housemaster, and to say, yeah, I'm thinking of doing this combination. Is that right for me? And actually a combination that's not right for many people might be just spot on for you. Or it may be that you fit into the more general pattern where actually doing subjects that support each other and group together is better. But if you're not sure, talk to your tutor, talk to your housemaster. Rob, overseas universities, thoughts on those, Trinity College Dublin as an example?
Yeah, I mean, Trinity College Dublin, I was just having a look, it's ranked 101st on the sort of standard metric, the QS rankings, which is very high, given the number of universities globally. Applying overseas, it can be complex. We just have to understand the specific requirements. And that is why we've formally appointed an overseas HE coordinator from this year, and why some of the boys on this call are already getting support. It's really important to just analyse and understand the requirements. They will be placed to make those applications, and it's just ensuring that they are competitive. The US is a bit more drawn out. It requires more. Often SAT and ACT, these aptitude tests that they will have to do as well, these admissions tests, but it varies by institution and by country. And we can only get into that by looking into the weeds of what each university requires. The numbers are on the up. We're getting more experience of it on a daily basis. And that is what our overseas HE coordinator is for, really. I should also add that Caroline Clements, who does that, she will add, Miss Clements, I should say, can also liaise with any external advisors, because particularly for US applications, sometimes parents and boys will speak to external advisors who can do some very close sort of handhold service and talk to individual schools, as they call them, universities in the US. And Miss Clements would be able to work closely with them so that the support we provide and all of the letters of recommendation and the things that we have to do in support of the application work seamlessly with any external advice that you might contract if you need to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marston. Does Art A-level preclude an academic degree at university? Absolutely not. But again, it depends how well you do it and what you do it with. But if you get a good Art A-level and you get 2 good other A-levels, or a good other A-level and a BTEC, for example, absolutely it does not preclude that. Again, talk to tutor, talk to housemaster. So much to do with what you do it with. If you do maths, physics and art and do them all really well, there are precious few courses that won't be quite interested in you.
We had someone do maths, physics and art a few years ago, a son of one of the teachers, and he went off to Imperial to read engineering.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Marston, global university knowledge, Canada.
Yeah, Toronto is quite popular. We are supporting at least one boy in the lower sixth who is interested in Canada now. Again, it's just looking at a bit less faff than the US actually to apply for, but it is becoming increasingly popular. When we get external sort of advisors who are really clued up on the overseas HE market, particularly from the UK, applying from the UK, I know Canada is in ascendancy in terms of its popularity. So US and Canada are becoming more routine features in the university application landscape from UK schools.
Thank you, Mr. Marston. What would happen if our son's GCSE results are less than predicted after choosing A-level subjects? Particularly this year, but actually as a general principle, but particularly this year, because the assessment regime is well, we don't know what it is at the moment. We're not going to be fascistic about this. As I've said before, my view is that if you come into the school in the third or the fourth form and you work hard, then you should come into the sixth form, and it shouldn't be about trying to exclude boys on the basis of GCSE results. Same goes for subjects, but we just want to make sure that it's the right subject for you. Now, if you fail to get the grade you notionally need to do a particular A-level subject, but your track record up to that point had been that you were always on for that grade and something had gone wrong in the assessment process, then Dr. Filtness, I think it highly unlikely that would be saying no. The only thing we want to avoid is boys stumbling into A-level courses that just aren't right for them, and where the chances of them doing really well are vanishingly small, not just because that leads to a poor outcome for them, but it also just makes for a miserable time in the sixth form when for 2 years you have to troop along to lessons that you're not enjoying, that you're finding a real struggle. It's just not nice.
Exactly. I mean, it's why I suggested you look at your target grades. If your target grades are not 7s, then or they're 4s and 5s or whatever, that's a good sign that that's probably not where you should be looking. And that's particularly the case for the very most difficult subjects, which is going to include the sciences and maths, but not limited to them.
And quite often, Dr. Filtness, we'll have a conversation after GCSEs are published with the head of department who'll say, actually, they've been fine up till now. I don't have any concern about them doing the A-level. It is case by case, but the only thing we'll try and stop is boys making choices that are not appropriate for them. Dr. Filtness, double award science GCSE and science A-level.
Yes, absolutely. I teach biology, as you know, boys, and there are some boys in my lower sixth class who did dual award. The requirement that you have a 7 is still there, so you need to get 2 7s or just about a 7/6, but that's very much scraping the barrel. The content is pretty much the same, so it's no problem.
Dr. Filtness, how many extra hours does further maths add to your timetable? I suppose it depends to an extent upon how good at maths you are.
Curriculum time, 6 periods at the moment, so it's not quite the full weighting. However, further maths is a subject that is going to take you the full measure of your 6 hours outside. So I think it's misleading to say, oh, it's only an extra 6 lessons, because the amount of work you'll need to put in is significant. However, our further maths results are excellent, and if you're a strong mathematician, I would definitely recommend that you have a conversation with Mr. Lem and consider doing further maths too.
And I think maths is, it's only one example of this, but it's a very good example of it. Really talented mathematicians are not just capable of doing really hard maths, but actually they can often do it pretty quickly and will look at a problem and the answer will present itself. Where you find people are spending hours is where it's just that bit too much of a challenge and they look at a problem for hour after hour. And so the time taken outside lessons, Dr. Filtness, to a large extent, it depends just how much you get maths. And if you get maths, then it's a reasonable demand. If maths is a struggle for you, then further maths is going to be really hard. Mr. Marston, while the boys are on remote learning and doing very well, that was me, not the questioner, what's the best way for them to start researching different courses? Is there, very good question, could have been planted, this one hasn't been, is there one website with a directory of all university courses?
Well, it's a good question. I think yesterday, certainly our current fifth form were all working on Unifrog. And although your focus yesterday was on some careers focused modules, You were looking at the CV Builder in particular. There is a universities module on Unifrog, and that would be a really good place to start. It's a bit of a one-stop shop for research. Ultimately, to get right down into the weeds, you still need to click on the link, which will be on there, to the university individual course webpage, as I sort of alluded to in the presentation. But Unifrog's fantastic. It's both a research portal, advice, know-how videos you can go into, but also it is the home of our application process until the very last step, where you put it onto the UCAS form and submit. So I'd encourage you to go onto UCAS. And we also sent out the Lent-Term Higher Education and Careers Programme. And I often mention this, so sorry for the repetition, but parents can establish a shadow account. Unfortunately, we can't let you spy on everything your son's doing, but you can have exactly the same functionality that he's got by setting up a parent account. So I'd really encourage you to do that. If you can dig up the, I know we've communicated lots this term necessarily, but the Lent-Term Higher Education and Careers Programme came to everyone. Within that is a guide for parents to log on to Unifrog, and they can have a play with it too.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marston. What's our view on doing 3 A-level courses in subjects that haven't been done before by that individual? If they're the right subjects, and if you've done your research, that's not a problem. Doing them to see what they're like probably is a higher risk strategy. Dr. Phillips, I don't know if you've got anything to say on that.
No, I think it's one of the traps that boys sometimes fall into is assuming that the subject at A-level is the same as it was at GCSE. So I would hope that someone who is looking particularly at new subjects would be more encouraged to do that research that I think everyone should be doing anyway. So I don't see it as being a problem. In fact, perhaps they might do more research than perhaps someone who is making assumptions would.
Thank you. Very good question. About the fact that a lot of information about A-level subjects comes from those who are good at them, and therefore they'll talk positively about them. What's the best way to get a balance? I think, to be honest, it's to talk to the teachers, to talk to the head of department, because in a sense they have a nicely balanced set of interests. They want to recruit into the subject, but they want to recruit the right people into the subject. So I think it's right to say our heads of department and teachers are pretty good at saying, honestly, how well they think a particular boy is suited to a particular A-level. I don't know if either of you want to say any more about that.
I'd only add that when we're in any normal year where we had a sort of subject fair, there would be boys studying the A-levels in the hall as well, and able to give every version of the truth. So they might be able to describe the ugly end of every subject that's almost inevitable when you're studying something hard, which A-levels become inevitably at some stage. So asking around the older boys in the house or others that would be another good way to go to.
And I think probably working out, having in your mind the questions about the things you're not well disposed towards or not particularly good at. So if you find maths a bit of a challenge, saying, how hard is the maths in this subject? If you don't like reading lots and lots of books, finding out, do you have to do that? But think of the things you're not particularly good at doing and ask the teachers in that subject, do you have to do a lot of it? And do you have to do a lot of it to a high level? That should give you a clue as to whether it's the right sort of subject for you. Now, there's a question, Mr. Marston, for you. I'm going to ask you. Are supporting subjects more relevant for UK universities because they tend to specialise early, whereas in at least some overseas universities, there are more sort of generalist courses in the first year before specialisation?
It's a really good question, and yes, compared to some overseas countries, the US is the most typical example where everyone goes in with this liberal arts curriculum. When you apply to a US university, you just apply to the university. You're not applying to say, I want to be an economist, I want to be a physicist, I want to do engineering. For that reason, I would actively discourage anyone if they said, I definitely want to be an engineer, I definitely want to be a doctor. I would discourage them from applying to the US because there wouldn't be much point in sort of going back a step, doing a liberal arts curriculum, which was even broader than their range of A-level study, and then waiting several years to then narrow in focus and get into the weeds of those subjects. So by definition, in the UK, you choose a subject and yes, it's channeled. And therefore that concept of facilitating subjects, the informed choices bit that I talked through first, applies in some cases. For the US, it wouldn't generally be the case, but you wouldn't want to hang around and wait 10 years to become a doctor when it might take 5 in the UK.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marston. Final question, Dr. Filtness. Psychology, when will it be known whether it's definitely an option for September?
It is definitely an option. However, because it's an option at a different school and I don't control their timetable, what I can't guarantee is that every boy's other choices fit with psychology. So I have to look at it on an individual basis. What I've asked the boys to do is to choose 3 subjects that they want to do here and then tell me which of those 3 subjects they want to replace with psychology. I meet regularly with Mrs. Orton, who's my equivalent at Sherborne Girls, and there are some girls who want to do some subjects here. So we're constantly in contact about this. We're going to start, both schools start putting the timetable together in the second half of this term, and I'm hopeful, more than hopeful, that the boys will be able to have their places doing psychology. It just needs coordination. So I can't guarantee, but I am working really hard to make it happen. Yeah.
Dr. Filtness, thank you very much. I think probably to sum up everything we've said tonight, it's all about doing your research, about remembering that it's about you and whether it's your A-level choices, BTECs, later on thinking about higher education. It's not about what suits your mates. It's about what's right for you, and avoiding assumption, finding out what particular courses require and thus whether they're suited for you. Mr. Marston, you've talked about universities. I think one of the most dangerous things is either to assume what universities will be looking for a particular course, or to ask somebody who went through the process 35 years ago and rely upon some, and I've seen it done with hilarious consequences, very outdated information, because things have changed an awful lot in the UK and overseas HE world in the last few years, and will continue to change. So you need to make sure you've got relevant, up-to-date information. But getting that information should be really exciting. It's going off to or preparing for sixth form and then university beyond that should be something really exciting. And actually doing the research should be something that's motivating and a pleasure to do. So don't look at it as a chore. Boys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, parents, for being with us. Boys, we are, as I've said many times, and it is, if anything, more true, we are so looking forward to having you back. We hope that it's not many more weeks before you can come back. We, of course, will let you know. In the meantime, if there's anything that we can do, whether to do with your option choices, your work at the moment, just how you're feeling about life, please get in touch with us. We are still here, and we're still here to do the very best we can for you. So thank you for coming tonight. Look after yourselves. Good luck for the next few weeks, and we'll look forward very much to seeing you soon. Thank you all very much.